We have two players. Pay close attention to their health bars. One of them swings, he hits, but wait, why did the health only update on one screen? We need replication. Short and simple. If we now turn on replication, there we go. Now both players can see the change in health instantly. So what exactly is replication, and how do we use it in our games? That's what we're going to explore today. And if you enjoy these kinds of explanatory videos, make sure to subscribe and comment what you'd like me to break down next. Before we dive into Unreal's version of replication, let's think about the word itself. Replication simply means to copy or reproduce something. If I replicate my friend's actions, I'm just copying what they did. In Unreal Engine, it's not so different. Replication is when something happens, like an event runs or a variable changes, on one computer, which is usually the server, and the Unreal Engine copies that change to everyone else's computers so all players can stay in sync. So when we say an actor or a variable replicates, what we really mean is that Unreal is keeping that data consistent between the server and all the clients. Every time a value changes on one machine, for example a player's health decreases, Unreal tells all the other computers in the same game session that the variable just changed so they can also update their own version too. If we don't explicitly tell the other machines that something changed, they have no way of knowing. That's when you start seeing desync. One player sees something that the others don't. In a multiplayer game, we have one server and multiple clients. Typically, the server is the one that actually changes the variables or runs the important events because it's the authority. It decides what's real and what's not. Once it updates something, the server sends that information to all of the clients so they can stay up to date. And that's what replication truly is, when the server copies or replicates a changed variable or fired event and makes sure that the same change happens on every other computer in the network. Alright, so now we understand what replication really is, let's take a look at how it works in practice, using my health and damage system as an example. So, here we are in the Unreal Engine. I'm now going to walk you through how I made the system that I've been showcasing up until now, and how did we use replication to do it. First of all, let me give you a brief overview of the system. We will talk about replication, but to start with, I'll just really quickly explain the default stuff that I've done. So on begin play, we're just creating a widget, setting it to these two widgets. So, this one above our head is the actual widget we want to display. Then we're showing the mouse cursor, that just made it easier for me, and we're setting our health to our max health to make sure whatever our health is our max health on spawn. This is just for testing purposes, so whenever I press I, we're going to decrease our health by 5, just so I could test it if the health decrease was working or not. Then whenever we click our left mouse button, we're going to go through a chain of functions. I'll explain those later when we get onto multiplayer, but then we come down to this play montage, which plays a punch montage, stops us from moving until we've finished, and at a certain point of the montage, we're going to do a sphere trace by channel, which will apply damage to anything inside. We'll spawn an emitter just so there's a cool effect, play a sound, do some slow motion stuff, cool, and then whenever we receive damage, we're just decreasing our health. In our health bar, we have a really simple setup. We just have a size box and a percentage bar, and actually in the event graph, all we've got is on event construct bind to this event health updated, which is the event dispatcher. So whenever our health updates, just call this event, which sets the new percentage of our health bar. Pretty simple stuff. It's a really simple, really standard system, but now you understand, globally what's going on. Let's go into the details of how are we using replication. The most important thing we have is this health variable. After all, it is a health and damage system. Now let's take a close look at how this works. On our health variable, on any variable in fact, you have an option to set it to replicated. On our health variable, we have none, replicated, and rep notify. These are the three choices we have. Now, let's ignore rep notify for the moment and let's just talk about what replicated does, as none means literally do not replicate. So when you set something to replicated, it just means whenever this variable updates, the client-side machine who updated the variable is going to broadcast that information, and all of the other clients are going to be updated that that health changed. So in our game, we have 2 players, and whenever one of them receives damage, one person attacks the other, then person 2, they reduce their health by 25, and they're going to tell all of the other people in the game, hey, my health has just gone from 100 to 75. That's that broadcasting the information. It's copying and pasting the information between clients, and that's what Replicated does. Now, rep notify is the exact same thing as replicated. Rep stands for replicated, but notify means give us a function which also runs every time that's updated. So it just means replicated with a notify. And the notify automatically creates a function for you. And inside the function, you can program some logic. So this function fires every single time the health variable changes. So when one person's health changes, this function fires, and it's this function which calls the event dispatcher, which is listened to by this health bar. If you don't understand how event dispatchers work, then please let me know in the comments and I'll make a video on it. It's not really that important to understand replication, that's why I'm not going into detail on it, but if you want a video, I will make one. So yeah, let me know if that's something you want to see. Now, if you try and make a variable replicated, it can only replicate if the entire actor replicates itself. So if we click on class defaults and search for replicated, as you can see, this is set to replicate. In this checkbox down here under replication, we can see replicates set to true. And as we discussed previously, when something replicates, what that means is the information that is updated is then updated on all the other machines at the same time. So whenever our health updates, we are telling everyone else, hey, our health is updated. We are updating the same health on all the other clients. That does not mean that everyone else's health changes. What it means is everyone knows everyone's health. So if we have 2 people in the game, player A, he knows his health, and because the other person's health is replicated, he also knows the other person's health. So it's not like when person B's health updates, it's going to also update his. He is just aware that the other person's health has updated, and he can use that information to update the widget display. So now we've talked about, variables being replicated. Let's move on to functions, because, at its core, replication isn't that complicated. There isn't much to replication. Once you understand the core concept of it, it's the idea that data is copied from one machine to another. When health updates, it's copied from one machine to another. Once you understand how that works, then, multiplayer systems, they kind of just build on top of that. So not only with variables can we replicate, but we can also replicate functions. Now we can change the replicating mode of a custom event, not a function, specifically a custom event. Functions cannot be set to replicated. So if you want to try and replicate a piece of logic, you have to run it on a function, and these sort of custom events, these input ones, they cannot be set to replicated either. The only things that can be replicated are custom events specifically. So if you want to replicate something, on a left mouse button click, for example, you have to create a separate custom event which has its own replicated mode and then call to it. So when we press left mouse button, we call this server start attack function, which is this server start attack here. Now, the reason we need to go through the server is because we're trying to do a multicast event, and multicast can only be ran on the server. Now, let's talk about what these different modes are and what they mean. Not replicated is super simple. It is not replicated. It literally, all it means is when this runs, no one else on the network is told that it has ran. So if you have a single player game, all your custom events will be not replicated. When you make a custom event by default, it is not replicated. It's a default state. It just means only run on the owning client and no one else. Now, if you try and run on the server, what this means is when this function fires, whatever has been called, whatever logic runs, will only run on the server. No one else in the game, none of the clients actually know. So you might have a situation where a client, which is just a player, so a player clicks left mouse button and they're calling a function which runs on the server, so they don't even get any actual output from what they've just done. The player sees nothing. The player has no information that this has just ran because it only runs on the server, as the server is authoritative. Being a server doesn't mean some massive, supercomputer in a warehouse. The server could also be any computer. Anyone's computer can be the server. It's all the server is. It's the authoritative version of the game that is running. And if you are running a game on one computer, so either it's a single player game or you are simulating having multiple clients, then what's going to happen is your computer will run the client and the server at the same time, but the server is this background process that you have no control over, so you don't have special privileges because you're running the server. It's just using the computational resources of your computer to run the server, but you have no control over it. So we run on the server, only on the server, not on the clients. This means the information goes from the client to the server, but it is not replicated further. No one else knows about it. Now we go to the server here, because like I said, a multicast event can only be run on the server, and this is what we want to do. We want to call a multicast event here. Ideally, after we've clicked left mouse button, we would instead say multicast play attack montage. Multicast this attack montage, but we can't because this by default comes from the client. We're in a BP underscore third person character. That is something that is, by default on the client. The client is just someone's machine. We do not know that it's on the server already, so we have to go through the server to then try and run it. And from the server runs this function, so the server is calling this multicast play attack montage, which is the multicast. Now multicast means run on the server and on all of the owning clients, run on the server and all of the clients. So this function is then copied from the server, so it runs on the server and on all of the machines. The server runs this logic on everyone's computer, so only the server can see this part run. So this is run on the server, but all of this is run on everyone's computer, and that is really important because we are playing a montage. So when we play this animation, if it was only played on the server, then only the server would see the montage, which means if you have 5 players in the match, only one of them would see the animation, and on everyone else's computer, it would look like they've just stood still. If you have this as run on owning client, it's the same thing. Whoever runs the animation can see the animation play, but the other clients in the network cannot see the animation playing because it's not running on their client, and the information that this function has just run and the logic of this function running has not been copied across the network. Let's have a look at what that looks like. So if we set this to run on owning client, compile and save and go and run the game. So as you can see, I'm here in the game. We have our 2 clients. The health bars are not synced because it's not replicated, and when one person runs a function, so when this person does this attack, on the other person's screen, they do not see the attack. This is because that information is not replicated. The fact that we have run this play montage, it only runs on the owning client, which is the person who's run the function. So they see it, but the other person has no idea. But now if I come back and if I set this to multicast, now when we play that function, now when we left click and we see the person throw the punch, both clients can see, everyone's computer can see everyone doing the animation because it goes to the server, and the server copies that and pastes it to all of the clients. The function, is spread across the network and everyone knows it has happened. Let's close this down now. So back in our third person character, server means run on the server and only on the server, run on the authoritative state of the game. None of the clients know about it. Run on owning client means only run on one person's machine. So as we saw with the previous example, if one person runs on owning client and they run an animation, they will see the animation playing, but the other people in the match won't see it because they're not their owning client, and that function has not been copied across the network. It hasn't been replicated across the network. But if we run something on multicast, which can only be done from the server, which is why we had to go to the server, then to this function. If we run on multicast, then we run it on the server and on everyone's clients. So now everyone can see that function being run. So everyone can see everyone's animations when they're being played. That is what replication is. That is how we replicate variables, and that is how we replicate custom events. I hope that made sense. I hope you've understood. If you want further context, if you want further information on how to do multiplayer, how to use multiplayer, I'm actually about to release a step-by-step beginner tutorial series on multiplayer where we make some of the common features such as lobby systems, health and damage systems, player spawns, team allocation, loads of really cool stuff. We're going to integrate Steam as well to an extent, but we're not going to fully go onto the online Steam multiplayer. We're going to look at local multiplayer just to keep things simple for a beginner introduction. Local multiplayer means only running on one machine, simulating multiple clients but on one machine, because that's the simple first step. And then if the series as well, we'll move on to online multiplayer using Steam. That series, it will come out on YouTube in a couple of weeks. The series all ready to go on YouTube. I'm just waiting for a few things on my end, but the series ready to go. It's going to come out in a couple of weeks, but you can get the series instantly on Patreon in early access, and the project files for the system. So if you want to support the channel, if you want to support what I do, see more cool tutorials, you can do that. Become a Patreon member and see that in early access. But like I said, if you subscribe and just wait, you will see it come to the channel in a couple of weeks, maybe even a bit sooner, because it is already. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you've learned and now understand how replication works. More queries, come and join the Discord, ask more questions. I'd love to go through more explanation. It's all good. I will see you in the next video, or maybe that tutorial series if you want to go and check it out.